The Castle of Conegliano. Welcome to the Castle of Conegliano. The visual tactile panel in front of you and the audio guide will accompany you in discovering this urban landmark. The panel represents on the right the castle map. Instead, on the left, you'll find essential historical information and the map key. The audio guide, after a short historical introduction, will describe in depth the general layout and the Civic Museum. Historical introduction. The top of the hill dominating the historic center of Conegliano still possesses the ruins of an ancient castle built at the start of the late Middle Ages. The constructions used for defense, which were authorized by the Bishop of Belluno in 1016, were mentioned for the first time in a document from 1189, testifying to their existence some decades prior. They reached their greatest expansion in the 1300s, a time when domination by the Scaligers, Venetians and Carraresi would lead to the construction of 3 rings of walls, equipped with numerous towers. The first defensive wall protected the Palazzo del Podestà, the small church of San Marco, and other buildings that were then dismantled on more than one occasion. Starting in 1420, the year Venice conquered Friuli, the importance of Conegliano as a walled city grew less, and its defensive structures were abandoned. In the 18th century, the fortress would undergo the greatest devastation when the Podestà Cicogna, who hailed from Montebelluna, ordered it to be torn down for material. Popular tradition claims that an insurrection chased him out of town and was able to save some parts of the construction still standing today. Transformed into a cemetery under Napoleon's rule, the fortress area was then repurposed in the early 1900s, and since 1946, the Torre della Guardia, after having been used as a prison during World War II, has hosted the town's Civic Museum. Area layout. The raised area of the fortress is preceded by the spacious Piazzale di San Leonardo, whose name calls to mind the presence until 1757 of the collegiate dedicated to the saint. Today, on this side of the square, only the bell tower and the apse, which has become part of the small church of Sant'Orsola, still survive. At the center of the square is an ancient wellhead. On the south side, to the left of the panel, a low wall offers a stunning view, which from the hill opens towards the historic center, dotted with the bell towers of churches and further beyond the plains. Nearby, on the other side of Via Coderta, we find the striking 19th century Villa Gerasinopoli, which, along with the castle, has become a city icon. A staircase divided into 2 allows access to the raised area of the fortress, adorned with an Italian-style garden surrounded by tall cypress trees. The garden has more than one level. At the center, we find the most spacious and highest area, with flower beds characterized by a subtle stippled texture. On the left is a narrower terrace on a lower level, currently closed to the public, while on the right is a portion of lawn with a steep slope. These last 2 sections are characterized by darker greenery and a larger stippled texture. The entire area of the fortress is surrounded by walls that in some sections present imperial merlons. These were added during the castle's first restoration in the mid-1800s by order of the Podestà Count Montalban. The reason for having opted for the Ghibelline merlon rather than the Guelph one, which would have been historically more appropriate, must be sought in the attempt to give the fortress a neo-Gothic appearance or to manifest the deep dislike for the papacy on the part of the city following the 1848 uprisings. In the central section of the garden, at the entrance to where you are now, The boxwood shrubs mark off 4 large flower beds divided by pebbled walkways that intersect at a wellhead decorated with vegetal motifs located on 3 octagonal-shaped concentric steps. The garden also hosts some sculptures and ornamental vases from Viale Spellanzon, in the 1800s called Viale dei Pubblici Passeggi, indicated on the drawing with small circles in relief. In the corner to the right of the entrance we find the Torre Saracena, number 2, used in the past as an armory and which today hosts a bar-restaurant. The tower is also called Mozza in reference to its stumpy height. In fact, it seems that after it was rebuilt in 1332, because it had caved in 1 year earlier, it took on its current appearance due to an explosion that blew off part of its top. The adjacent panoramic terrace overlooks rolling hills marked off to the north by majestic mountains. In the corner further north of the walls, in the lower section of the garden, we find the recently restored ruins of the ancient Porta del Soccorso, number 3, opened in 1337 on a pre-existing half-tower and then used as an escape route in the event of enemy attacks. Instead, on the south side of the garden we find the Torre della Guardia, number 1, 28 meters tall, built entirely in brick before 1338. It is also called the Torre della Campana because until the top part toppled in 1491, it hosted the Campana Magna, Great Bell, that would call people to assemble and mark the opening of the city's council. Today, the Civic Museum is found here. The Civic Museum. The first proposal to establish a city museum dates to 1868, but it was only in 1946 that the castle tower began to host some collections of local history, which in 1952, when Cavaliere Alfredo de Mas became director, were paired with an important picture gallery that still today has works of impressive artistic and historic interest, thanks also to subsequent acquisitions. Among the many works worthy of being mentioned is the splendid fresco made by Giovanni Antonio de Sacchis called Il Pordenone, the organ panels painted by Cima da Conegliano and his workshop, and the touching San Girolamo, a work from the first half of the 1600s by Giuseppe Ribera called Lo Spagnoletto. On the first floor we find the evocative Sala del Camino, characterized by a large hearth whose hood calls to mind a doge's horn, or rather the head covering belonging to Venice's doges. The upper floors instead display archaeological finds and historical mementos.